Hi, this is the first video in a series of videos I'm doing as a memoir. So I'm just testing these out and seeing how they go. The lighting's not so great here, but I'll try and fix it up a little bit so there's not so much the glare. There's a bit of glare coming in from the left-hand side here. I'm in my motorhome and I'm in Akatarua. Yeah, by the river here. My name's Neil Andrews. You all know me anyway. That's why you're watching this. I was born on the 13th of January 1950 in Lower Hutt Hospital, and I was first 8 years of my life we spent in our house on the plateau in Timarua. We used to call it Timarua. We knew very little in those days about Māori language, te reo. Very little about Māori people, in fact. So 1950 was like 71 years ago. I'm 71 this year. A lot has changed since those times. First 8 years of my life were lived in pretty much a semi-rural bliss, really. We had completely free range of a wide area, which included bushland, a river. We lived on a plateau, which was basically a cliff face, quite a wide sort of plateau area, which had a cliff on one side, which went down, and we had a pathway down through bush, native bush, to a little creek river that ran down below us, which we could swim in summer. And we lived in a very big old house. Sorry, an old house, wasn't big. My dad was a builder, carpenter, and he put additions onto it. He had a huge vegetable garden, and we lived very happily there. I remember one year, I think it was 1954, probably the year before I started school, it snowed, and we had snow all over the house and all over our front lawn. That was a big deal, and we never saw it again that close down. It snows on the back of the hills around where we lived, Rimitaka Hills, Tararua Ranges. Anyway, I suppose those first 8 years were pretty happy. I went to the first school I went to was a little two-classroom school, which is now, I don't know, it's still there, I think, the building, but we moved after a few years there. I think I was only there a year and a bit. We moved to a brand new school, which was called Brown Owl School, which is down by the entrance, the road entrance into the Akatarua area. And I believe since then that school is also not being used either. It's don't know why. It was a brand new school in the early 50s, so we thought it was pretty flash. But then when I was 8, my parents decided to move, and we moved to a house, in fact, on the main road, which is now on Ferguson Drive. Its original address was 311 Main Road, but they renamed it Ferguson Drive, and I think they changed all the numbers too for some reason. But the house is still there. Eventually, Mum and Dad owned it for many years, and eventually they sold it to Ian and Amber when they were first married, and I think they had both of their kids there, were raised there. So my brother Ian and his wife Amber raised their kids at that same house. And then in 1958, when that happened, we moved there. I moved to Trentham School, which was a much older school than where I come from. I thought it was a very big backward step. I didn't like it much at all. It took me a long time to get used to settling in there. I've got to say that all through these first 8 years of my life and on, but in those first 8 years, I had a very confusing time. I had a very loving mother, very kind and generous at times, but then she obviously suffered from some form of mood swings because she could become quite angry and go into rages and break things and shout at us and yell at us and hit us and pick us up and truck us down on the ground sometimes. We had some pretty tough times. So it was quite a confusing time. I know my sister Vera and I experienced a lot of that. Also my sister Kay, and I'm sure obviously my sister Margaret and brother Arthur had seen those things happening too. But it was a pretty tough time in many ways. quite confusing when you're little. You know, there were one or two incidences there where I was quite frightened and worried about what would happen next. I did some interesting things in those times. I remember once Mum and Dad used to work when we lived in the plateau still. Mum and Dad used to work. They were very hard workers. God, you couldn't fault them in any way in terms of their commitment to giving us a good start in life. And my dad worked all day. And Mum, of course, was looking after kids, little babies, preschoolers and so forth. And in the evenings, they put us in charge of Arthur, basically. And they went off, not every evening, but 2 or 3 nights a week, maybe. I don't know how many nights, maybe 3 or 4. And they cleaned a bank premises in Upper Hutt in the shopping area. And we were left on our own. And it was bloody chaos at times, as you can imagine. And lots of dramas going on at home, all these kids tearing around and meant to be in charge of basically Arthur was probably a 13 or 14-year-old, maybe 15. I don't know how old he would have been, maybe 14. Was he even going to college then? Oh, I don't know whether he'd started what we call college, what some people call high school now. And Margaret would have been a couple of years younger than him. So memories. I remember getting sick of them and jumped out the window, went for a walk, ended up walking along the road towards Upper Hutt. I don't know what I was doing. It's about 5 miles away, which is a reasonable considering time. It was getting late in the evening, probably around 6 o'clock. Started to get dark, and I was walking along this fairly busy, windy road towards Upper Hutt, and a guy pulled over and picked me up. And bit of a guardian angel chap, really nice fellow, and he wanted to know where I was going. So I told him where I was going, and I said I was going to see my mum and dad, and he wanted to know why, and I didn't know what to tell him. And he said, where are they? And I told him where I thought the bank. I told him I knew they worked for that ANZ bank, and they were cleaners. So anyway, he took me there, and he went in and knocked on the door, and mum and dad came out, and of course they were absolutely bloody stunned to see me. I think I was 5. I might have even been younger. I could have been before I went to school or just after I'd started. I knew I was fairly young. Of course, they was pretty upset to see me turn up on the doorstep when I was meant to be home. He looked after my brothers and sisters. And the guy talked to them, and they verified everything I said, and he took off. So I was very lucky that, but half of me was really chuffed that I'd actually made it. And I think it put a little piece of information in my mind that, you can get rides and you can get to places without having to pay for it. Or, I don't know, it was pretty weird. I was just a kid. But I suppose even then I thought I was a pretty independent sort of a bugger. And then people pushed me around. I thought I was being pushed around at home. I can't honestly remember anyone doing anything that was bad to me. I just was like, oh, stuff this, I'm off, I don't know. When you're young like that, you just take it into your mind. And I achieved this. I got to work. And of course, it did change the power structure a little bit at home, like it was just Arthur and them were a little bit more, I think, as I recall, a little bit more respectful of what I might want and what I might be doing. Because, if he's going to do that every time, we need to watch out for him. And mum and dad, I never got into trouble for it, but they were pretty upset, and they told me I must never do it again, and so forth and so on. But it was just a memory that sticks in my mind about some of the things that happened in those years. I don't know what it was with mum, but she obviously suffered from something that I would say she was bipolar or something like that. Of course, completely undiagnosed, and I'm no expert, although I've been around a lot of people in my family who've suffered from mood swings and so forth, and I've suffered some of them myself as well. When I say suffer, I would say I suffered like the other people did. I've experienced them is more the term. And of course later on in life I learned ways to deal with that, some of them unsuccessful, short-term successful but unsuccessful ultimately, and others been very successful. But mum certainly suffered greatly from mood swings and mood disorders, if you like, and anger and temper, and she would fly into rages, and then she'd pick us up and chuck us around the room sometimes. It could be quite frightening at times. And sometimes you'd do something which wasn't very great, but you'd fly into a rage, and get very angry, and she'd cry and sob and blame us for what had gone wrong. It's a very confusing time, actually. I think in those first 8 years of my life, I put down a lot of experiences into the culture of me, my psychology, which affected me and helped form me as I grew older. Yeah. Okay, that's the first instalment. Second instalment later.